Hi everyone, welcome to your last watch and work for the entire semester. Way to go. This one's going to be a little bit different in the sense that there's not going to always be a right or wrong answer. I want you to think about how you would approach it as a parent. I know that some of you may not be in a situation where you have adolescents as children right now or even have children, but someday you might, and someday they will be adolescents if you do. So just kind of from a place of thinking through how we're going to manage that, knowing and applying all of the things we know about their development. All of these scenarios come from the California Department of Education. We're going to read through them. We're going to think about what we know about development and apply it to how we would respond. Let's go ahead and get started here. The first one is scenario 1. Your teenager was told to come home by 11 p.m. They were going to attend a football game and get a burger with friends after the game. The clock hits 11:30 p.m. and your teenager has not come home or contacted you about where they are. They arrive home at 11:45 p.m. So what is the issue? Yeah, they're late and they haven't communicated, right? So pretty concerning. Okay, what do we know about development? We need to keep in mind when responding. Okay, we know that their decision making is going to be impacted because a lot of times this is the first time they're having to make those decisions and they're not really able to weigh the pros and the cons of how it's going to turn out for them just yet. We also know morality is a little bit of an issue as well, and the fact that they're kind of just beginning that conventional stage around understanding why they might engage in behavior and not. They're trying to make others happy, okay? And another piece might be also that they have a lot of loyalty to their friendship, right? Friendships are very important at this age range. So how are we going to support open communication? Again, not a right or wrong, but obviously it might not be the best thing to have them be yelled at as soon as they walk in the door. We want to make sure that we're having a conversation. So you're going to have maybe a calm demeanor, have a situation where you can have a conversation, maybe give yourself time to calm down and reflect before you engage. Okay, last question. What would you do as an authoritative parent? Again, going back to high expectations and high demands, we're going to make sure that there maybe is a consequence for it, but we give them some understanding of why it's important, giving them a plan for future if they get stuck in that situation. So if you're stuck in that situation, you don't want to leave your friends, this is what you can do. I need you to communicate with me. I need you to tell me what's going on. But because you didn't this time, there might be also a consequence of missing, not being able to get a burger next time, or next time I'm going to drive you to the game and pick you up. Might be something along those lines. But at least providing them some understanding of why you are concerned. Okay. Again, may not be how you would respond, and that's okay. I look forward to reading how you would. Scenario 2. Your teenager has several friends. One friend named Stephanie is very loud and uses bad language. Your teenager has mentioned that Stephanie often gets in trouble at school because the teachers do not understand her. When she has spent time with Stephanie at the mall, your teenager always comes home later than when she was told to. Your teenager has asked to go with Stephanie to see a movie. You do not want your teenager to spend time with Stephanie because you feel like she makes bad choices. So what is the issue? The issue is probably that we're concerned that Stephanie is going to lead to more risky behavior and get our own child into more trouble. It's a relationship or a friendship that you don't feel is positive for your child. What do we need to keep in mind about development when we're responding to this? We understand how important friendship is and the loyalty that children feel to their friends and that closeness, that intimate relationship they have. Okay. We also know that they are more likely to engage in risky behavior when they're around their friends. That's an important piece to keep in mind. And that their decision making is still impaired. They haven't experienced everything yet. They're not able to weigh the pros and cons of everything. So how are we going to support open communication here? Again, for me, I would probably approach it in a calm manner, making sure that it's not a heightened situation. I'm not going to approach this conversation right after something has happened with Stephanie necessarily. I'm going to look for an opportunity to talk with her more about friendship as a whole and decisions, and maybe looking at when it's not a heightened situation, when she doesn't have that kind of hot, intense emotional reaction tied to it. And then next question is, what would you do as an authoritative parent? Okay, again, no wrong or right answers necessarily here. I mean, obviously there's going to be some wrong ones, but I know you're not going to do those. But there's a lot of room to think about how we would approach this. Maybe it could be that you allow her to be friends with Stephanie, but you have her be interacting with Stephanie at the house. So Stephanie has to come to your house. You make sure that you keep that communication open so you're able to problem solve with her some of those issues with Stephanie and understanding how to make better decisions when she's around Stephanie. Maybe it's that you engage with Stephanie's mother and talk with her. Maybe you set up, different circumstances around how she's allowed to engage with Stephanie. So maybe you take her to the mall. Maybe there's certain time limits. Maybe there's a very clear understanding of the consequences if she makes a misstep with Stephanie. If she's home late from the mall, she has an understanding of what could happen. Also having a real conversation around why we want to pick friends that are supportive and how that can help us. All of those things are pieces that I would consider, but I look forward to hearing what you also put down. Okay, third scenario. The school principal calls you to let you know your teenager has been late to school 5 times. The principal is checking to make sure that everything is okay at home. You were not aware that your child had been late to school because they leave home with plenty of time to get to school on time. Okay, so what is the issue? It's been late to school, and we also don't know where they're going. So if they're not at school, where are they at? So what do we know about development that we need to keep in mind when responding? We know that parent influence is really important, and understanding where our children are and what they're doing and who they're engaged with is a big part of keeping them out of trouble and keeping them safe. We also know that children don't always make the best responses or the best decisions. They have their impaired decision making. They're still developing in their moral reasoning. We also know that they have a lot of loyalty to their friends and that they are likely to engage in behaviors that are going to get them quick reward, even if it's smaller, because they can't experience delayed gratification for very long. Okay, how are we going to support open communication? So again, maybe not marching ourselves down to the high school right away and pulling them out of class to have a talking to, having a moment to reflect, think about how we can approach the conversation, think about what's important about the conversation, having a calm, open-ended questions. What would you do as an authoritative parent? And again, not a lot of wrong or right or wrong answers. There are definitely going to be some things that we don't want to do. Those are obvious things, right? We're not going to be yelling and screaming and be aggressive. Those are obviously wrong answers. But for the most part, lots of area to kind of think about how you would respond. For me, I think it would be having a very open-ended conversation about, what are you doing? What's happening? I think it's also changing parenting styles and being more responsible on your end. Obviously, there's been a piece that's you've been unengaged with because you don't know when they're getting there. Maybe you have an expectation that they need to text you when they get to school. Maybe you put a tracker on their phone to make sure they're getting to school. All those pieces around gathering information to make sure you're actively involved might be important, as well as, having a conversation about, well, where have you been going? And then from there, other conversations might need to take place and other consequences and reactions, right? But again, love to hear your responses. They can definitely be different than mine. Scenario 4. Your teenager is supposed to come home after school to do homework and get dinner started because you don't get home until 5 p.m. Today, you arrive home at 5 p.m. and notice that your teenager is getting home at the same time as you. When you ask them where they were, they say that they went to get food after school and had been hanging out with friends. Your teenager knows that they are supposed to ask permission if they wish to alter their school routine. So what is the issue? They're breaking rules. They're not living up to their end of the deal. They're kind of not really engaging in their responsibilities. And they're not communicating with you. What do you do? What do we know about development that is going to inform our approach and our conversation? Again, we go back to this place of impaired decision-making, right? And also being really heavily influenced by peers and more likely to make risky decisions when we're around our peers. And also the importance of relationships and friendships at this age range. Maybe it is important to allow them to have time with their peers. How can you meet that need somewhere else? So how are we going to support open communication? Right? We're still going to be very calm, make sure we have a moment to reflect before we get upset. Not that we're not allowed to feel those things, but we're not going to have a very angry conversation. We're going to sit and have a conversation that's open-ended questions, and we're going to make sure we use our authoritative parenting. And what might that look like? What would you do as an authoritative parent? Okay, maybe provide a consequence for not having dinner ready, but also making sure that you know that they're to support them, looking at possible ways for them to have time to be with their friends, but also making sure their responsibilities are met, right? So meeting their needs and also meeting the responsibility and helping them make better decisions. Okay. And this is a little bit different in the sense that, we took what we knew about development, we applied it, and also that there might be different ways of looking at different situations. And again, I look forward to hearing your thoughts and your perspective. And with that, your last watching work is complete. I will see you in the checkout. Bye.